You believe obedience is weakness, yet your refusal to submit keeps you predictable, manipulable, and ruled by impulses you mistake for freedom. You were trained to flinch at the word obedience. It was packaged as slavery, weakness, surrender. That conditioning wasn't accidental. A man who refuses obedience entirely becomes easy to predict. Predictability is the cheapest form of control. Here is the inversion you were never taught. Disobedience without an internal law is not freedom. It is drift, and drift always ends in capture. Most men imagine themselves sovereign because they reject rules. In reality, they obey the loudest impulse of the moment: hunger, fear, validation, pleasure. That is not rebellion. That is servitude to the lowest bidder inside the nervous system. The man who refuses to obey anything higher than emotion becomes governed by whatever emotion spikes hardest. Obedience is not about kneeling to people. It is about installing a command structure inside yourself. Without hierarchy, there is chaos. Without chaos, there is leverage. And without leverage, you are prey. Look closely. Every effective system, armies, predators, surgeons, states, operates under strict internal rules, not because they are weak, but because precision requires constraint. A scalpel obeys the hand. A missile obeys coordinates. Power without obedience wastes itself. The modern man is told to be himself, which is code for remaining fragmented. Fragmented men argue with themselves, hesitate under pressure, and leak energy through contradiction. They mistake that noise for personality. In truth, it is a lack of internal command. Obedience to a principle solves this. One law above all others, one axis that does not negotiate. When a man submits to a single governing rule, everything else aligns or gets cut away. This is not morality. This is engineering. You do not ask whether the rule feels good. You ask whether it works. This lens shift is surgical. Obedience is not the opposite of dominance. It is its prerequisite. The most dangerous men in history were not impulsive rebels. They were disciplined executors of an internal doctrine, often invisible, always non-negotiable. The weak obey people. The strong obey systems. The sovereign obey a principle. When you refuse all obedience, you do not rise above control. You fall beneath it. You become manageable through appetite, distraction, outrage. The world does not need to dominate you directly. It simply waits for you to react. Reaction is obedience in disguise. This chapter exists to break the reflex, to detach obedience from humiliation and reconnect it to power. The question is no longer, will you obey? You already do. The question is what you obey, and whether you chose it consciously. If you do not select your law, one will be installed for you, by culture, by fear, by desire, by whoever benefits most from your inconsistency. Obedience to a principle is the first act of sovereignty. It is the moment a man stops improvising his life and starts executing it. Everything that follows, discipline, restraint, dominance, rests on this foundation. Reject this, and you remain scattered. Accept it, and the noise begins to die. The human mind does not tolerate a power vacuum. When no principle governs, something else steps in. Usually not intelligence, usually not strategy. Instinct fills the gap, fast, emotional, short-sighted. This is where most men live without realizing it. You think you decide. In reality, you react. An inner law is not philosophy. It is a control mechanism. It determines what gets immediate authority and what gets denied access. Without it, every impulse makes a bid for power. Hunger argues with pride. Fear negotiates with desire. Ego interrupts reason. The result is internal civil war. Civil wars are easy to exploit. This is why emotionally unruled men are predictable. Push their insecurity, they lash out. Tease their desire, they fold. Threaten their image, they overcommit. They call this being human. Strategists call it exposure. The mind demands hierarchy. When there is no commanding principle, emotions behave like rival generals. None are loyal. None are consistent. Each wants dominance only in the moment it appears. That is not freedom. It is volatility. And volatility is the first thing predators look for. An inner law collapses this chaos. It does not debate impulses, it ranks them. It does not ask how you feel, it asks whether an action aligns with the rule. This single filter eliminates hesitation. Hesitation is where power dies. Notice something uncomfortable. Discipline feels unnatural at first because your nervous system is used to improvisation. Improvisation feels like freedom until pressure arrives. Under stress, the improvised man freezes, the governed man executes. This is why armies drill the same movement thousands of times, not because soldiers are stupid, but because thinking wastes time under fire. The law replaces deliberation. That replacement is what creates speed. Inside your mind, the same mechanism applies. When a principle is absolute, decisions shrink. The question is no longer, what do I want, but does this violate the law? Most options die instantly. Energy consolidates. Direction sharpens. Men fear this because they confuse law with limitation. In reality, law removes friction. You do not feel constrained when gravity keeps your feet on the ground. You feel constrained only when you resist it. Here is the brutal truth. Men without an inner law outsource decision-making. They let trends decide, moods decide, other people's approval decide. This feels easier because responsibility dissolves, but so does authority. Authority begins internally. External dominance is just its shadow. Carl Jung warned that what you do not make conscious will rule you unconsciously. This is not poetic language, it is mechanical. Unexamined impulses become default rulers, and default rulers never care about your long-term survival. The inner law makes the unconscious negotiate or submit. Once installed, the mind becomes quieter, not softer, quieter. Noise is replaced by tension. Tension is productive. Noise is waste. Most men live loud lives and call it passion. In reality, they are leaking power through contradiction. The mechanism is simple, which is why it is dangerous. One principle above comfort. One rule above emotion. One command that does not ask permission. This does not make you moral, it makes you functional. Men who lack this mechanism are not evil or stupid, they are unmanaged, and unmanaged systems always break under pressure. Pressure is not coming, it is already here. Without an inner law, you will keep mistaking intensity for strength and movement for progress. With it, you become harder to read, harder to steer, and harder to break. That is the mechanism. Cold, efficient, unforgiving.
When a man rejects inner law, he does not become unique, he becomes a type, predictable, recyclable. History produces the same failures over and over because human weakness is efficient. These archetypes are not insults, they are patterns. Patterns exist because they work, until they don't. The reactor. This man lives in response mode. News, insults, opportunities, women, money, everything pulls his trigger. He believes he is decisive because he moves quickly. In reality, he is programmable. Whoever controls the stimulus controls him. He confuses urgency with importance and spends his life solving other people's problems. The moral performer. He obeys no principle except appearing good. Loyalty, kindness, honesty, he wears them like armor, believing they protect him. They do not. They expose him. Because he has no internal law, he borrows ethics from the crowd. When the crowd shifts, he collapses or betrays himself. He is easy to manipulate with shame. The hedonist strategist. He talks in systems and power language, but secretly serves comfort. Discipline is discussed, never executed. He calls indulgence balance and avoidance patience. He knows just enough theory to justify weakness. Under real pressure, he chooses relief over leverage every time. The image addict. This man does not live, he performs. Every action is filtered through how it will be perceived. He sacrifices long-term position for short-term validation. Praise controls him more effectively than threats. Remove the audience, and he dissolves. The permanent student. He studies endlessly, commits never. Information replaces action. He mistakes preparation for progress. The absence of a governing principle keeps him safe from failure and permanently irrelevant. He is not ignorant, he is unselected. Each of these men believes he is choosing his path. None of them are. They are obeying unexamined forces: fear, approval, pleasure, safety, identity preservation. These forces are not evil, they are simply unfit to rule. Notice the common thread. None of these archetypes lack intelligence, they lack hierarchy. Their minds are democracies where every impulse gets a vote. Democracies are slow, predators are not. A man with an inner law does not eliminate these impulses, he subordinates them. Fear becomes a signal, not a commander. Desire becomes fuel, not a leash. Morality becomes a tool, not a costume. This is why selection happens quietly. The world does not announce who is weak, it tests. Pressure reveals structure. Under pressure, the unruled man fragments. The governed man simplifies. If you recognized yourself in one of these archetypes, do not defend it. Defense is attachment. Attachment is another master. The point is not guilt. The point is diagnosis. You cannot upgrade what you refuse to see. These archetypes exist to show you what happens when no principle sits at the top of the hierarchy. You do not need to become ruthless. You need to become ordered. Ruthlessness without order is just another archetype waiting to fail. The next step is uncomfortable because it exposes why this failure repeats across centuries. It is not cultural, it is not modern, it is human. Civilization is thin, thinner than you were taught. Beneath manners, laws, and moral language sits an older force, selection. It does not argue, it does not explain, it removes what cannot hold structure under pressure. History is not a record of progress, it is a record of collapse and replacement. Every fallen empire followed the same sequence: internal disorder, loss of authority, moral confusion, then conquest or decay. The cause was never external first. External forces only finish what internal weakness exposes. The same rule applies to men. When inner law erodes, something ancient wakes up. In tribal societies, men without discipline were liabilities. They endangered hunts, fractured alliances, attracted violence. They were not debated with, they were excluded or eliminated. Modern civilization hides this process behind bureaucracy and soft language, but the mechanism remains intact. Chaos invites predation. This is why periods of abundance produce softness, and softness invites replacement, not by better men, by harder ones. History does not reward virtue, it rewards coherence. A coherent enemy defeats a fragmented moralist every time. Look at human mythology, the dragon, the flood, the apocalypse. These are not fantasies, they are psychological memories of what happens when order dissolves. Chaos does not negotiate, it consumes until structure returns. The unruled man believes the world is fair because unfairness threatens his identity. The world is not fair, it is selective. Fairness is a story told by stable systems to keep internal peace. When stability breaks, the story ends. This is why tolerance is a strategy, not a virtue. Tolerance is the sign of a safe system, not a cause of safety.
Tolerance allows the undisciplined to accumulate. It wastes the strength of the enemy without expending strength. But when pressure rises, tolerance becomes a liability and selection resumes. This is why obedience to a principle has always been sacred in warrior cultures. Samurai, Spartans, legions. They were not free men in the modern sense. They were effective men. Their obedience did not make them weak, it made them lethal. Modern men are told that restraint is repression and hierarchy is oppression. This narrative serves systems that benefit from distracted, indulgent populations. A man busy expressing himself is not building leverage. A man chasing pleasure is not organizing power. Nature does not care about your intentions. It only measures outcomes. You either hold form under stress or you disintegrate. There is no third category. This is the threat. When pressure increases, as it always does, men without internal law will not rise. They will be sorted, quietly, economically, socially, biologically. Selection never announces itself. It simply closes doors. You see it already. Men who cannot delay gratification become dependent. Men who cannot restrain emotion become liabilities. Men who cannot obey anything higher than feeling become replaceable. Civilization rewards compliance when stable and competence when unstable. We are moving away from stability. The old buffers are eroding. In unstable conditions, softness is not compassion. It is a death sentence. The ancient truth is this: order must exist somewhere. If not inside you, then outside you. And external order is always harsher than self-imposed law. This chapter is not meant to frighten you. Fear is cheap. It is meant to remove illusion. You are not living in a protected era. You are living in a delayed reckoning. Men who sense this early adapt. Men who deny it moralize. Moralizing is what people do when they lack power. The threat is not collapse itself. Collapse is neutral. The threat is being unprepared when it arrives.
Once you accept that chaos punishes the unstructured, the question changes, not why obey, but how to use obedience deliberately. This is where most men fail again. They either reject discipline entirely or turn it into self-punishment. Both miss the point. Obedience is not self-denial, it is target acquisition. A principle is only valuable if it produces leverage. If it does not sharpen decisions, reduce exposure, and increase long-term positioning, it is decorative. Strategy does not care how noble your rule sounds. It cares whether it survives contact with reality. Strategic obedience begins with a single non-negotiable law. Not 10, not a code book, one rule that sits above comfort, above reputation, above relief. Complexity is for stable environments. Simplicity survives war. This law acts as a kill switch. It terminates behaviors that feel good but weaken position. It forces delay where impulse wants speed. It forces silence where ego wants display. Most men cannot do this because they are addicted to expression. Expression leaks power. Observe predators. They do not move constantly. They wait. Waiting is obedience to timing. Timing is power. When a man obeys his principle, three things happen immediately. First, emotional manipulation stops working. Insults lose their grip. Temptations slow down, not because you are numb, but because emotion no longer outranks the rule. Reaction time stretches, space appears. Space is where choice lives. Second, reputation becomes optional. You stop managing perception and start managing position. This terrifies social animals because status games replace structure for them. A man who does not signal constantly is unreadable. Unreadable men are dangerous. Third,
Energy consolidates. You stop negotiating with yourself. Every internal debate drains force. Obedience ends debate. You execute or you don't. No drama, no identity theater. This is why disciplined men appear calm under pressure. Calm is not temperament, it is the absence of internal argument. Strategic obedience also introduces something rare, delayed dominance. You accept temporary discomfort for future leverage. Most men cannot do this. They are optimized for relief, not control. That makes them useful tools and terrible leaders. Do not confuse this with rigidity. The principle is rigid. Tactics are flexible. The law does not change. Methods adapt. This is how power survives uncertainty. You will notice resistance when you try this, not from enemies, from your own habits. Habits do not want to die. They will argue, rationalize, moralize. Ignore them. They are remnants of an old hierarchy losing command. You are not becoming obedient to others. You are becoming inaccessible to manipulation. That is the trade, and it is a brutal one because it removes excuses. No one can save you once you install a law. You cannot blame mood, childhood, or circumstance. Sovereignty removes comfort along with chaos. This chapter is about weaponization. Obedience is no longer a virtue or a flaw. It is a tool. Wielded correctly, it makes you slower to trigger, harder to steer, and costly to cross. What remains is the most difficult part, because the old version of you will not coexist with this structure. What you are facing now is not improvement, it is execution. The version of you that survived by improvisation, validation, and emotional flexibility cannot coexist with an internal law. It will resist. It will frame this change as losing yourself. That fear is accurate. Something must be lost. Identity is the most efficient cage ever built. Men defend it harder than territory because identity justifies behavior. Once installed, it explains every weakness and calls it character. This is why identity death feels violent. It removes your alibis. The old identity thrives on reaction. It needs stimulation, conflict, reassurance. It feeds on narrative, stories about why you are this way, why the world is that way, why change can wait. The inner law has no interest in stories. It only measures compliance. When the law enters, the identity panics. You will notice it first in small moments, the urge to explain yourself, to seek recognition for restraint, to prove you are still you. These impulses are not harmless. They are the dying reflexes of a system being replaced. Do not negotiate with a dying structure. Identity death is not dramatic. There is no announcement, no applause. It is quiet. You stop reacting where you used to explode. You stop chasing where you used to beg. You stop signaling where you used to perform. From the outside, it looks like withdrawal. In reality, it is consolidation. Most men never experience this because they are too afraid of emptiness. But emptiness is not absence, it is space. Space allows structure. Structure allows power. Here is the critical shift. You stop asking, "Who am I?" That question belongs to adolescents and philosophers. The governed man asks, "What do I obey?" Identity becomes a byproduct, not a driver. This is why the process feels cold. Warmth is emotional surplus. Surplus leaks. Precision does not. Friends may tell you that you've changed. They are correct. Systems resist when one component stops behaving predictably. You are no longer optimizing for comfort or consensus. You are optimizing for alignment. The old self will try to survive by disguising itself as balance, humility, or authenticity. Do not be fooled. If it cannot obey the law, it does not get a vote. This is where most men quit, not because it is hard, but because it is lonely. The law does not comfort you. It does not reassure you. It does not care how you feel about the loss. It only cares whether you are functional. And once the old identity is gone, something unsettling happens. Silence. Not peace, silence. The absence of internal commentary, the absence of self-justification. Many men mistake this for emptiness and rush to fill it. That is a mistake. Silence is where authority lives. From this point forward, you are not driven by expression, you are driven by execution. You do not perform discipline, you apply it. You do not seek meaning, you impose order. You do not ask permission from others or from your own comfort. The death is complete when obedience feels natural and indulgence feels foreign. That is replacement, not self-improvement.
This is where separation becomes irreversible. By now, you understand something most men never allow themselves to see. Life is not organized around fairness or intention, but around selection. Selection does not need your consent. It only measures structure under pressure and removes what collapses. Here is the final warning: clean without comfort. If you do not obey a principle, you will obey circumstances. Circumstances are brutal rulers. They do not explain themselves. They do not care about your past effort or future potential. They reward only what functions now. The world ahead will not punish weakness loudly. It will suffocate it quietly. Opportunities will stop appearing. Respect will thin out. Dependency will grow. You will not be attacked. You will be bypassed. This is how the unchosen disappear. Men like to imagine that failure arrives as catastrophe. It does not. It arrives as gradual irrelevance. You wake up one day and realize decisions are being made without you, not against you, without you. That is worse. This is the cost of refusing inner law. The men who survive transitions are not the loudest or the most moral. They are the most ordered. They have fewer rules, but those rules are absolute. They move less, but when they do, the movement counts. This is not a call to motivation. Motivation decays. This is not a call to community. Communities fracture. This is a call to install a structure that remains when everything else erodes. Do not announce it. Do not explain it. Do not seek approval for it. The moment you advertise your discipline, it becomes performance again. Performance is weakness disguised as virtue. Your obedience must be invisible and relentless. From this point forward, there are only two categories of men: those who obey a principle and those who will be ruled by something cheaper: attention, pleasure, fear, survival. If you choose nothing, you choose default. Default is where systems send excess men. This is not philosophy, it is sorting logic. You are either governed from within or harvested from without. There is no neutral ground, no pause button, no appeal. The elite do not wait for permission. They select themselves by obeying what others refuse to submit to. The door does not close loudly, it simply stops opening. Now you know why.